Big breaking news is that Alexander Isak has requested to leave Newcastle. He wants to explore his options this summer. Well, let's digest that news because it's really, really big. For those of you that were part of our lunchtime broadcast, we were speaking about the news of Alexander Isak and what it means for him possibly that could he leave the club this summer. We talked about this at great length after he had been left out of the Newcastle's traveling squad for their Asian pre-season tour. So, anyways, welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to your favorite football updates channel. I'm coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda. Thank you so much to our new community members, our subscribers, our regular suspects, the semi-irregular and the non-regular suspects. I do appreciate your love and support. Continue to subscribe to the channel and help me to 2,000 subscribers. That's the mission at the moment. But wait, let's get into the discussion because this exclusive has been revealed by Craig Hope of the Daily Mail, saying that Alexander Isak has told Newcastle he wants to explore a move away from the club. Now, like I said, this has come in the wake of the 25-year-old Swedish international being left out of the Newcastle's pre-season squad for their Asian tour. Now, it hasn't been the first omission this summer. He was omitted from that squad that played against Celtic and lost by 4 goals to nil. And in explanation for that, the manager Eddie Howe said the player had it was a precautionary omission, first of all, with an injury issue, and then he also added that the player had been subject to enormous transfer speculation, which could have unsettled his mind a bit, so he chose to leave him out of the squad and sent him away because he said it would have fueled further speculation if he had been at the game while watching it from the stands. Well, a couple of days later, we discussed that situation and said, okay, let's take it for what it is. But that came in the wake of Liverpool's interest in the striker. Well, Newcastle has told all suitors all summer that the player is not for sale, regardless of at whatever price. In fact, Ed Howe says he cannot put a price tag on him. He cannot put a value to him. That's how big a star he is. He's one being that has been quoted by clubs like Arsenal, like Liverpool, in terms of interest. There is interest from the Saudi Pro League, although no talks have taken place between his representatives and Saudi Pro League clubs, but there is interest from that side. Then, so fast forward, he is now being omitted from that traveling squad for their Asian tour. They're going to be in Singapore. They will also go to South Korea in Seoul. So while in Singapore, they will play against Arsenal this weekend for their pre-season friendly game. And then while in Seoul, they'll play against K-League 11. I think that's like the best 11 from the domestic league that side. So as part of their pre-season tour. Now, despite signing Hugo Ekitike from Eintracht Frankfurt for £79 million, £69 million being what is guaranteed for the 23-year-old French forward, Liverpool remain interested in signing Alexander Isak and is simply waiting for Newcastle to open that door to say we are open to listening to offers for our prime striker, for our prime player, for our crown jewelry. And that's simply what they are waiting for before they can make an official bid. But they wrote to Newcastle to express their formal interest in signing the player and are on standby to be told, well, the door has opened, come and place your bid. Because despite signing Hugo Ekitike, they are still open to signing Alexander Isak. Can they afford it? Most definitely, that's what I feel, that they can afford it. Whether the PSR rules will then eventually catch up with them, that remains to be seen. But so far this summer, they are in a very healthy position financially, despite the financial outlay that they've made. Let's not forget that when these clubs are signing all these players, and regardless of what fans may say, these are more like future financial commitments. Some monies get paid at the time of signing these players. Others are monies come a bit later. For example, in the work of them signing Jeremy Frimpong, they agreed to pay that 35 million euros in a space of 3 years. One would argue or would think that 30 million euros is almost smaller fee that could have been paid, let's say, in one go or in 2 installments at best. But Liverpool spread that over 3 years, very well knowing what else they needed to do in the transfer window. Guess what? They've gone on to add on, Milos Kakes from Bournemouth for a reported £40 million. They signed Florian Wirtz for £100 million as guaranteed fees, plus 16 point something million pounds are in expected add-ons. So Those are payments spread across a whole, an extended period of time. Same applies for the whole work ticket deal. Now, we are not privy to what they paid upfront to teams like Bournemouth, to teams like Bayer Leverkusen, to a team like Eintracht Frankfurt to sign all those players. But just know that all this money is not paid upfront as a whole, that if a player is costing 100 million pounds, then Liverpool just carry, their money bags and say, here's your 100 million pounds. We are good and done and dusted. So when it comes to whether Liverpool can still make a financial outlay in the excess of 120 million pounds to sign a player like Alexander Isak, I say definitely they can actually do a deal like that. What it simply means, because we are talking about a team that is constantly playing in the UEFA Champions League, and present day, especially starting with last season, clubs are starting to make, an average of 80 to 100 million pounds by playing in the UEFA Champions League through match revenues and, participatory fees. And, every win you get in the competition, you get some money, draws, and things of that nature. So they are able to raise that money. So even if, let's say, they were to buy Alexander Isak for 150 million pounds, they are capable of raising that money within the next 2 seasons. So that's a possibility. So that's if they can agree to, a comfortable payment structure with Newcastle for a transfer of the 25-year-old. He is a player that has been, subject to interest, like I told you, from Liverpool, Arsenal, and Saudi Pro League clubs, and even other European giants. There's a time PSG were mentioned in that conversation that they will be interested in signing Alexander Isak. Now, he only joined Newcastle 3 years ago. That was in the summer of 2022. I think arguably their most expensive buy, in the excess of 60 million pounds when they signed him from Real Sociedad. His first season, 2022-2023, was a little bit of a struggle through injuries. He only could make 22 league appearances in the Premier League, but still managed to score 10 goals and provided 1 assist. The subsequent season, that was 2023-2024, that's when he really put his mark on the Premier League when he scored 21 goals in 30 appearances and I think provided 3 assists thereabout. Then last season, again, he continued to show signs of progress. He made 34 appearances across the Premier League alone, and then he scored 23 goals and provided 6 assists. That's a 29-goal involvement for the Swedish striker. Then also, he helped Newcastle win their first major trophy in 71 years when he scored against Liverpool in the finals of the Carabao Cup. So remember, on course to the finals, they knocked out Arsenal, beating them home and away by 2-0 respectively, advancing 4-0 on aggregate. And he was a big part of that. In the domestic league, in the Premier League, you remember he scored that sole goal, the header, against Arsenal to beat Arsenal by 1-0. So he is a big player that does shine in big moments and small moments. He does rise to the occasion. Very athletic, by the way. Can dribble past players. Can move a bit backwards deep to, carry the ball up front. He can lead the counter press. He's good, in the air and in comparison to Victor Gyökeres, of course. So, anyways, then also the other question would be, can Arsenal still make a move for a player like Alexander Isak? Because the reason as to why Arsenal pivoted towards Victor Gyökeres and Benjamin Sesko earlier on in the summer is because they were under the impression, as it had been told to all suitors, that Alexander Isak is not for sale. Now, even though the player has asked to leave, it is not to say that Newcastle are going to let him leave. Because remember, he still has 3 years left to his current contract. Newcastle could hold to their guns and say, you will leave maybe next summer, but not this summer. It could be that. But also, according to David Ornstein, Newcastle keen for the Swedish international striker to stay on an improved deal, but also exploring potential replacements. Now, there's been talk of a potential new deal, and apparently, Alexander Isak is asking for 300,000 grand per week. Is he worth that? Most definitely. If you have had players like Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, on such wages at Manchester United, and the kinds of wages the likes of Erling Haaland are earning at Manchester City, Jack Grealish, and things of that nature. Kai Havertz is really apparently on significantly high wages at Arsenal. So if you do have players in the Premier League that this player is even better than, not by just numbers, but overall as a player, then why can't he command that kind of wages, So he is capable of commanding those kinds of wages. He is worth those kinds of wages. However, it's also being reported that Newcastle may not be able to afford those kinds of wages at the moment, especially bearing in mind their current, their previous predicament, the profit and sustainability rules of the Premier League. You remember they had to let go of players like Yankuba Mite to try and balance the books, and that's why the last summer in January they were unable to redesign players. So because they wanted to stay in compliance with the profit and sustainability rules of the Premier League. So with that in mind, it remains to be seen whether they can agree to a new contract with the player on the wage demands that he's currently on. Is he trying to demand for higher pay? I'm not suddenly convinced that it is particularly about the higher pay, because he is already the most or the best paid player at Newcastle. I remember I was reading an article at the tail end of last season, and it was by the Telegraph, and a Newcastle reporter was arguing of how it would be a downgrade for more or less a downgrade or even a leveler, or that it would not make any difference for players like Alexander Isak and Anthony Gordon to leave Newcastle to go to Arsenal. Well, he must be taking a chill pill at the moment now that the player has asked to leave. Now, he has not particularly asked to leave to go to Arsenal or anything like that, but he tried to make an argument that he was not to leave this summer. And he spoke about the strong position that Newcastle are in. And indeed, they are into that position. They are in a strong position because the player has entered his third last year of his contract. So meaning you can hold it out, and by the end of the season, he will still have 2 years left to his current contract, which means he could still fetch top dollar for you. And maybe then, actually, it would create much more legal room or wiggle room for teams, especially the Premier League, that will be interested in his services. So let's just wait it out and see whether Newcastle will eventually open the doors to receiving bids for Alexander Isak. But be rest assured that Liverpool are still interested in signing him, and they are capable of making a significant bid for him. The other team that is interested or is out in the market looking for a striker is Manchester United. They have no reported interest in particular in Alexander Isak, but I mean, for a team like Manchester United, arguably one of the best, biggest clubs in the world and in the UK, why wouldn't you be throwing your hat in the ring for a player like Alexander Isak? The downgrade here in this case is that why would you leave Newcastle that have UEFA Champions League and go to Manchester United that do not have UEFA Champions League? Maybe it would be about the money. Do United have the money to make such a financial outlay? Maybe yes, maybe they don't. But let's not forget they've spent in the excess of 120 million pounds to get Matthias Cunha and Bryan Mbeumo. So look, we've argued that Manchester United need a prime striker, a striker that already knows the Premier League. In fact, Ruben Amorim has told his recruitment team that his preference would be a striker that is already adapted to the Premier League. Manchester United, why not make a bid for Alexander Isak? I mean, put the money on the table. You can afford 300 grand plus a week in wages. Just commit to paying 120 million pounds for Alexander Isak. And if you can convince him, then he will join you. If there is a player that United need to take them out of the ruins that they currently in, it's a player like Alexander Isak, a striker like Alexander Isak, capable of scoring goals. That's if they create the right environment around him. He's shown the capability that he can score all the kinds of goals that you can dream of. But it's a developing situation. Let's wait and see how things will revolve in the next course of maybe 5 to 6 weeks before we close out the transfer window. But I do know for a fact that the best solution in this case for Newcastle would be to retain the player. They are looking for alternatives in the market, but we also know they've been struggling to land their primary targets. They've lost a good number of those, the likes of Bryan Mbeumo, the likes of Hugo Ekitike, the likes of Joao Pedro. They've lost all those to Premier League competitors. They are on the verge of losing James Trafford, who is their number one goal-keeping priority from Burnley, because Manchester City are back in that conversation. They want to activate their buyback clause, which is worth about 40 million pounds, according to reports. So we're just going to monitor this situation and see how it does develop in the coming days. But there you have it, guys. Do let me know what your thoughts are. Should Newcastle let go of Alexander Isak, or they should fight tooth and nail to keep him? Because for me, I feel fight tooth and nail, keep him, try and perform very well next season, guarantee yourself a place in the UEFA Champions League, for the subsequent season while making good money out of the starting season is UEFA Champions League, and then you'll have all the financial legal room to go and get strikers for replacements. They're already looking in the market. They are looking to sign Yohan Wissa, but I know Yohan Wissa is not a replacement for Alexander Isak. In any case, they wanted a replacement for Callum Wilson, who has since left the club as a free agent and is speaking to West Ham United as a free agent to try and join them. So let's wait and see how this situation will develop in the coming days. But it does put manager Ed Howe in a very, very difficult spot, as well as Newcastle as a whole, because you wouldn't want to lose a player like Alexander Isak. Do not forget to like and share. Comment on this video. Let me know what your views about this news about Alexander Isak. Where would you want him to play? I've seen some Arsenal fans saying cancel that medical that is being scheduled for Victor Gyökeres and run to Newcastle and make a deal for Alexander Isak. I do not think Arsenal will be making that move. It's not to rule out that Arsenal will be throwing their hat in the ring to a player like Alexander Isak. We just have to wait it out and see, because under ideal circumstances, I've told you multiple times, he is a player that Mikel Arteta would have loved to have signed this summer. But do let me know what your views are about this news, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new here and help us to 2,000 subscribers. Bye bye and stay blessed for now.